We are on Brooklyn Bridge today, one of the attraction in New York City. The Brooklyn Bridge, the construction was started 1869. It takes 14 years to complete the whole bridge. The bridge is a suspension bridge. Look at this bridge. They have a two span. Let's go. Let's talk about the Brooklyn Bridge today.
The Brooklyn Bridge is a hybrid cable-stayed/suspension bridge in New York City, spanning the East River between the boroughs of Manhattan and Brooklyn. Opened on May 24, 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge was the first fixed crossing of the East River. It was also the longest suspension bridge in the world at the time of its opening, with a main span of 1,595.5 feet, 486.3 meters, and a deck 127 feet, 38.7 meters, above mean high water. The span was originally called the New York and Brooklyn Bridge or the East River Bridge, but was officially renamed the Brooklyn Bridge in 1915. There have another bridge parallel with Brooklyn Bridge is Manhattan Bridge. It was opened December 31, 1909. It also on East River, connected Brooklyn and Manhattan. Proposals for a bridge connecting Manhattan and Brooklyn were first made in the early 19th century, which eventually led to the construction of the current span, designed by John Roebling. The project's chief engineer, his son Washington Roebling, contributed further design work, assisted by the latter's wife, Emily Warren Roebling. Construction started in 1870. With the Tammany Hall-controlled New York Bridge Company overseeing construction, although numerous controversies and the novelty of the design prolonged the project over 13 years. The Brooklyn Bridge is the southernmost of the four toll-free vehicular bridges connecting Manhattan Island and Long Island, with the Manhattan Bridge, the Williamsburg Bridge, and the Queensboro Bridge to the north. Only passenger vehicles and pedestrian and bicycle traffic are permitted. A major tourist attraction since its opening, the Brooklyn Bridge has become an icon of New York City. Over the years, the bridge has been used as the location of various stunts and performances, as well as several crimes and attacks. The Brooklyn Bridge has been designated a National Historic Landmark, a New York City Landmark, and a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark. The Brooklyn Bridge, an early example of a steel wire suspension bridge, uses a hybrid cable-stayed/suspension bridge design, with both vertical and diagonal suspender cables. Its stone towers are neo-Gothic, with characteristic pointed arches. The New York City Department of Transportation, NYCDOT, which maintains the bridge, says that its original paint scheme was Brooklyn Bridge Tan and Silver, although a writer for the New York Post states that it was originally entirely Rollins Red. The Brooklyn Bridge City Hall/Chambers Street Station is a New York City subway station complex in Lower Manhattan. The complex is served by trains of the IRT Lexington Avenue line and the BMT Nassau Street line. The station is served by the 4, 6, and J trains at all times, the 5 train at all times except late nights, the 6 train on weekdays in the peak direction, and the Z train during rush hours in the peak direction. One of the all-time favorite activities to do in New York City is walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. When going about your day, you can decide to do so either from the Manhattan side or the Brooklyn side. This article will talk you through the exact entrance points for the Brooklyn Bridge pedestrian pathway both on the Manhattan side and on the Brooklyn side. So, when you are ready to take on the Brooklyn Bridge for yourself, you should have no trouble finding those exact entrance points to get you right up onto the pedestrian pathway. To provide sufficient clearance for shipping in the East River, the Brooklyn Bridge incorporates long approach viaducts on either end to raise it from low ground on both shores. Including approaches, the Brooklyn Bridge is a total of 6,016 feet, 1,834 meters, long when measured between the curbs at Park Row in Manhattan and Sand Street in Brooklyn. A separate measurement of 5,989 feet, 1,825 meters, is sometimes given. This is the distance from the curb at Center Street in Manhattan. The main span between the two suspension towers is 1,595.5 feet long and 85 feet, 26 meters, wide. The bridge elongates and contracts between the extremes of temperature from 14 to 16 inches. Navigational clearance is 127 feet above mean high water, MHW. 9. A 1909 Engineering magazine article said that, at the center of the span, the height above MHW could fluctuate by more than 9 feet, 2.7 meters, due to temperature and traffic loads, while more rigid spans had a lower maximum deflection. The Brooklyn Bridge, one of the oldest suspension bridges in the United States, stretches 5,989 feet, 1,825 meters, over the East River, connecting the New York City boroughs of Manhattan and Brooklyn, on Long Island. Construction began on January 3, 1870. The Brooklyn Bridge was completed 13 years later and was opened for use on May 24, 1883. Upon completion, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world, the first steel wire suspension bridge, and the first bridge to connect to Long Island. Originally referred to as the New York and Brooklyn Bridge, It was dubbed the Brooklyn Bridge in an 1867 letter to the editor of the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, and formally so named by the city government in 1915. Since its opening, it has become an iconic part of the New York skyline. It was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1964. It was the longest suspension bridge in the world, by far. A few high-profile collapses in the first half of the 19th century prevented suspension bridges from immediately catching on. Undeterred, Roebling figured out how to stabilize them, largely by adding a web truss to either side of the roadway platform. He built 4 suspension bridges in the 1850s and 1860s, including one over the Ohio River and another near Niagara Falls. All would later be dwarfed by the Brooklyn Bridge, which, with a main span of just over 1,595 feet, was by far the longest suspension bridge in the world. It remained that way until 1903, when the nearby Williamsburg Bridge overtook it by 4. Filming location, and most visited tourist attractions, this architectural wonder of the world also has a very interesting backstory and a few fun facts about the Brooklyn Bridge.